GameStop is actually going to go bankrupt. Topic bought ThinkGeek, which was owned by GameStop, but they sold it because they were desperate. Topic bought ThinkGeek for $122 million, but then GameStop countered at $140 million and kept ThinkGeek. I haven't been at GameStop much for 10 years. I buy a lot of used games from GameStop. It's over now. I'm got Amazon. I think I'm finished buying games altogether now. GameStop bought out all the competition, and now it's their turn to go bankrupt. They bought out FuncoLand and EB Games. PC has Steam. The PlayStation 5 will have a 4TB hard drive and have downloadable games on PlayStation Network. Xbox 2 will be crap. It'll have the same problems as Xbox One. No one would want it. Xbox 2 wouldn't have the Sony exclusives like Uncharted or Persona or the JRPGs. GameStop doesn't know what to change or what to do. A lot of stores not making profit. GameStop is too big for what they need, and they're spreading themselves thin. Employee knows at the end is coming, they stop asking for pre-orders. Would you like to buy a protection plan to protect our company? We will give you a Game Informer subscription. I go into GameStop, there's no teenagers working there. There's 35-year-olds trying to hustle you that make $12.50 an hour and 20 hours a week. You're lucky. So I don't like GameStop. I'm kind of happy. A terrible company with terrible business practices is going under due to the major shift on how people obtain games. If GameStop could have done anything to save this, I think that even a beloved company who treats their employees well would have an issue with the shift on how people buy video games. I doubt Retro will save one because the Toyriffic, who sold retro games, went bankrupt in May. We're actually shifting from buying video games at all to buying ATVs and snowmobiles. Snowmobile and the ATV market is on the rise. I kind of found something wrong with them 12 years ago when they didn't accept my JPEG CDs of my video game collection and replied to that. Those people behind the counter had no soul. If the game industry goes all digital, I think I'll stop buying video games. I won't sell them. I just won't buy any. I'll buy the newest versions of Odroid and RetroPie.
Hey, I'm Cody, or Camelot331, and I am here today to tell you about my GameStop story. I was hired in July of 2007, which started an 11-year journey of complete and utter AIDS-filled hell. Like, the vast majority of the experiences that you have are gonna be negative. You know, whether it be your superior, whether it be your customer base, anything. I mean, it's quite terrible. So when I started, I worked 40 hours a week right off the bat, which is something that was a little different back then than it is now. So you'll hear stories about people working at GameStop part-time and they're working 3 to 9 hours a week, which is the case now. But when I started, I worked 40 hours a week. And I'll tell you why I worked 40 hours a week. Because I did everything my store manager told me to do without question. And I mean, like, terrible task. Whether it be alphabetize the entire PS2 wall, which was like 30 feet long. Or, you know, cleaning the bathroom, which is a whole nother story when it comes to my old manager from back in those days. But I would do it without, you know, question, which means he wanted me there. So that being the case, I was there 40 hours a week, going directly into holiday. So my first holiday hit. You know, it's a holiday in retail. It's my first holiday, you know, in the job force, really. And it was absolutely god-awful. As you can imagine, working in just retail, but working GameStop retail is pretty rough. And I did not expect it to be as slammed as it was. Now, one of the things I enjoyed the most was the midnight launches we did for like Halo 3 and the World of Warcraft expansions, and we would have huge launches for those games, lines all the way down to the Walmart complex, which is just half a mile away. It was just awesome. And the environment was always really fun. And, to be honest, the business kind of took care of itself back in those days. We had the Edge card back in 2007, which gave you 10% off. So it's the same thing as the Power card is today. But they wasn't, they weren't so strict on the, the selling of it, because everything was kind of selling itself, because, video games were exploding. That's when Call of Duty 4 was coming out, and that's when, Halo 3 was, hitting it hard. So at that time period, everything was selling itself. So it was a really enjoyable period. 2007, 2008-ish, probably the best years there. And I love the people I worked with. So if that's something I can take away from GameStop, is I really had a good relationship with all the people I worked with. There was some I did not. Specifically in the later, years, it was completely different. But in the beginning, it was like we were a family, and that was really cool to me. And I know it's not like that at very many GameStops, so it was a really isolated incident. So I was moved up to an SGA in March of 2008, and I was ready for that position way before that, but my manager told me that my district manager said I was too young for that, which is completely illegal. Of course, I didn't know that at the time, and I would have done anything anyway, but, that was the case, unfortunately. So when I was in SGA and we started transitioning in from 2008 to 2009, 2009 is, I don't remember exactly, but 2009, 2010 is when the Power Up card really came to fruition. So right before the Power Up card really got rolling and we started that practice, you started to see really strange practices being done. Now, I want to reiterate how terrible my manager was back in those days. He was a very bad person. He would literally just put edge cards on people's transactions and just and hope they wouldn't notice. And if they did, he would tell them to leave their store. Like if they tried to return it, he'd get mad, or he'd blame it on somebody else. And of course, he ran the top numbers in our district every week, of course. So naturally, not to that extreme, but naturally, that was my environment I was learning in. So, I was right in the thick of it. I was doing the shady things as well, and running very good numbers, which helped me get, my promotions over the years. So I attribute it to that, which is a very scary thought when you think about it. Now, a good example of something shady that happens 99% of the time at GameStop, every GameStop you go into, I've worked at a lot of them, and I've never not seen this happen, right? So let's say you're going into the store to buy Red Dead Redemption 2. Okay? Now let's say it's on sale for $39.99. New. Now keep in mind this is new, which the Power Up card has no effect on other than points. I don't know an employee that wasn't pushing, the circle of life, that wouldn't say, hey, if you get this Power Up card, this will actually only be $39, and then you can pay the difference to the Power Up card, and you'll save $5 off of the retail price. You get what I'm saying? So they were saying it was $5 less than $59.99, but the game was already on sale for $39.99. So they were lying to them to get a Power Up card. And I saw that happen 5 times a day, every day, no matter what store I was in. Right? So that's terrifying. Another good example of shady practices is reservations. So I've seen people go into the reservation list and see that a customer had a game that he maybe didn't pick up or wasn't ring out through the system that had $60 on it. So they would cancel that reserve, either pocket the money from the refund, or they would add 10 reserves onto a transaction, so their numbers for that day would be outrageous, through the roof. That happened every day, no matter what GameStop you go into. Now, these associates have to do this. This is what the higher management pushes. This is the environment they create. You have to fall in line, or you lose your job. It's as simple as that. I can name off shady practices for days and days and days, but I think you get the idea. and I'm sure you've heard multiple stories from other sources of the shady practices they do. So I was moved up to an ASM in 2010, where I had to transfer to a store about an hour away, and it was a new store that was opening up. So that was a really exciting opportunity for me. Unfortunately, it came to my attention that my manager had called the district manager and told him I was not ready to move up. Obviously, because he wanted me to stay and do everything, because that's how I was. I did everything for him. So he told the district manager that I was not ready to move up. Obviously, he thought that if he got somebody else in there that wasn't me and saw the things that he was doing, he'd be gone. So that's probably the thought process he was, having at that point in time. And obviously from that experience, you can see how bad of a person my manager was. Now, I'm going to have another video, a separate video on specifically him, just talking about the crazy things that happened, because it would be an hour long, and I think you'd really enjoy it. So I'll do that as well. But moving on. So I called our district manager and was furious that my manager had called, and I was like, hey, I'm ready for this. I want to do this, because at the time I was gung-ho. I wanted to move up. I wanted to do things. I was excited. I was driven. And he was all about it as well. So I ended up transferring to that store. I drove back and forth, an hour, which was pretty terrible. But it was a really fun experience. I enjoyed opening that store. I enjoyed the people I met. A very eccentric man I hired actually became the store manager a few years later. Another separate video. Guy's insane. I mean, absolutely insane. But another video. So, 2012 came. I transferred back to my home store, where my hometown was. And I became the store manager. So this is 2012. And this is when it started, I was on top of the world, right? I was a store manager. People that worked for me were my friends. We had great midnight launches. Everything was going great. And my store was ranking in the top 100, usually the top 10 in the entire country, every single week, which was huge because that never happened in our district. The store I had taken over never even ranked in the top 4,000, and I was ranking 97, 4, second, third, which was awesome to me. That's when I figured out that what you did the day before, the week before, the month before, the year before, never mattered. We were on conference calls. My district manager never even would acknowledge that I was second or third in the company. He would acknowledge people that were like 900 and 1,200 in the company, and I would be sitting there in third. He would never say anything, which was insane to me. You want positive reinforcement, right? I mean, that's a good way to manage. It's a good way to lead. So that was kind of the beginning of the end, because I always strive to perform, and we performed honest. We didn't, commit shady practices like I did when I was under my other manager. We were honest. We were just talked about games and we had fun doing it. And people came in to see us, and we had loyal, dedicated customers. So, they were violent. They would fight for us, They loved our GameStop. And that was a really cool experience. So one time my regional came in, and he said my store looked terrible because I was missing a few shelf talkers. The top 2 rows for the most recent reset had 2 shelf talkers, like on the top 2 rows, and I didn't have them. I don't remember what happened, if they got lost in shipment or if they, got lost in general. No idea. So he drilled me for about an hour, and my district manager was standing right beside him and looked so furious at me. Then, right after the regional left, he sent out a region-wide email saying that just because you rank good and you exceed profit and plan doesn't make you a good manager, which was directed at me specifically. And that was just officially the beginning of the end for me, because they were pointing out a thing here or there and completely ignoring how successful that our business was. So this is around the time where the company started to switch to complete and utter negative reinforcement. 100% across the board. Never a good job, right? It was always, hey, you guys are number 1 in all these categories, but you're number 4 in this category, and we got to fix that, or else you need to find a new place to work, which is actually something they actually said. My regional and my district manager had said on several occasions, if you can't do this thing we're focusing on this week, then you need to find somewhere else to work. So it was always under a threat of being fired. So this is around the time where the Circle of Life came in, and I know everybody has heard about that. It literally made us rip off every customer. We had to. Our district manager would actually just say, hey, just sell it to them. Sell it to them. He basically was telling us to just rip off everybody we could, which was essentially the name of the game anyway at this point. And if you didn't make Circle of Life for 2 weeks in a row, then you were basically under the threat of termination. They actually had a policy around it. If you did not make Circle of Life for 2 weeks, regardless of position, if you were a store manager, you didn't make Circle of Life for 2 weeks personally, then you would be threatened to be terminated. No first and final. Terminated. So you can see why the selling environment is the way it is, right? I mean, the Circle of Life pushed us to be that way, and it still does today. Another thing that happened was the federal government required anybody making less than $47,000 a year to be eligible for overtime. And all of the store managers are on salary at this point. So what does GameStop do? They make all their store management hourly associates. Now here's the catch. You have to work overtime to get your previous pay that you were getting salary. So your child was sick or you had an emergency and had to leave, you're not making your salary anymore, right? If you worked 40 hours, you were actually making $80 less than your salary weekly, which completely and utterly demotivated every store manager in the company, and I can guarantee you that. We went to conference that year, and the atmosphere was so negative. Everyone was so furious at the company, and the company did not care. Every year around March, April, May, never a consistent date, it was just random, the store managers would get an annual bonus. Now, our annual bonus was never high, but every year it would get lower. And the company would release a statement saying that they appreciated how hard we worked, but ultimately the performance of the company falls on the shoulders of the store management. So we were directly responsible and either wouldn't get our annual bonus or it'd be a very small fraction of it. There was actually one year where my bonus was $64 for the whole year. GameStop. Power to the players. The last couple of years I was there, I never felt safe. It always felt like I was on the verge of getting fired. Whether it be for your bathroom being not clean, your Circle of Life not being up to scuff, you just having a bad week in sales, you're not beating plan for the year, you're not beating profit for the year. And my DM would come in all the time and just tell me that I just needed to resign. He'd look in the bathroom would be a little dirty, and he'd be like, you just probably should resign. Or we would be struggling in Circle of Life for the first week in 2 months. We've made 7 out of 7 weeks, and the 8th week we're struggling. He'd come up to the store, you probably should just resign, buddy. You're just not in it anymore. You should probably resign. This is about March of 2018. One of my associates called HR and made up a bunch of crazy stories to my HR rep, because I was always extremely professional with my team. But those same people had gotten managers fired previously, like previous years, just by calling HR and making up stuff. So, of course, that's what happened. So HR shows up, and, they interview me, and I tell them, of course, none of that's true, whatever. Then they say that they're, going to call somebody and see what they can figure out, but, they don't know for sure what's going to happen to me. And at that point, I just, handed my keys over, and I was like, look, it's been a long time. I'm just, I'm done with this place. And then I walked out, and that was it. 11 years, gone. Wasted. In other good news, as soon as I left, I had another job lined up making almost double what I made at GameStop. And it's so much easier. So, it all worked out. All in all, if you're ever thinking about working at GameStop, we had people coming in, younger kids, and they were like, man, I want to work at GameStop. I want to talk about games. I want to sell games, There is some of that. You get to talk about games, yeah, but it's not what you think. You're going to get in there, and you're going to, in just 1 week's time, you're going to be getting threatened to be terminated if you're not ripping people off and making sure that they get that power-up card. Just add it onto their transaction. Hopefully they won't notice, especially if they don't speak English. If they don't speak English, you put it on that transaction. That was what we, in my district, called the district tax. We had a district name, but we would say the district name tax. And the tax was, if you didn't speak English, we put it on your transaction. Because what are you going to do? Come in and they never returned them. So it was all money in their pocket, which is fine, I guess. What can you do? Well, anyways, that's my GameStop story. It was a long time. If you're thinking about working there, don't. It is terrible. I don't know why I worked there 11 years. Maybe I'm a masochist. I don't know. Maybe I like to be tortured. I mean, I am into that kind of thing. So, that's probably why I stayed there so long. Because I just want to die anyway. So it was like a slow death. A slow burning death. So I hope you liked the video. I'm going to make a lot more from just specific GameStop stories that I've had. And there are some crazy ones. Crazy ones. I'll give you a hint. Oral sex in the back room. Okay? Drugs being sold out of the back room. Manager having sex with prostitutes in the back room during store hours. That's not even close to the worst things that happened. So stay tuned. If you like this video, hit a like, hit a subscribe, leave a comment, tell me about your GameStop stories, and let's share and have fun. All right, thanks. Bye.